I got a bad feeling about this. I hope this thing comes apart. That's a really good sign. It's actually moving. Yes. Really worried that we're gonna come apart. Ow! These little pins hurt when the first thing that happens when you're pulling on this is as soon as it comes loose, it turns over and then your fingers jam into the pins really hard. Every time. All right, now we just need to clean everything up and put it back together. Before I put the handle back together, I'm gonna go ahead and soften the tang a little bit. Probably should have done it before this stage, but it's fine. So right now the tang's kind of hard. Well, the end of the tang isn't really hard, but the base of the tang is kind of hard. Tempered at 415 degrees or whatever, so I want to go ahead and draw back the temper on the tang so it's more like a spring and less likely to break. So I'm just going to bring it down to like a blue color and maybe slightly gray. Definitely want to bring that temper into the ricasso a little bit because that's the most likely places it would break if it could would be right there where it touches the ricasso. You want to make sure you bring that heat into the ricasso. Keep an eye on it. You don't want to get any blue colors into your edge because that'll soften the edge. Probably don't even want any purple colors really, but it looks like the heat stopped moving there. It should be okay. Yeah. That's how you draw the temper back and make the tang more like a spring and less like a hardened cutting edge. So it'll be more better. Getting the lineup pins and all the pieces. Got six lineup pins for this giant buoy. All right, time for ensemble. Front spacer, middle spacer, rear ivory segment, pommel. Put the whole thing back onto the blade. Give it a good little whack to set it. Oh yeah. Gotta like that. Pummel nut. Tighten her up. Also, if the fittings look like they're a funny color, it's because to clean the epoxy that was inside of the fittings, inside the tang slot and stuff in the fittings, I went ahead and just heated them up with the torch to like 500 degrees. Just to burn the epoxy out of there. It's easier than scraping it out. There she is. This handle is officially ready for shaping. All the components are here. The handle's set in epoxy. We got lineup pins and everything. It can all be shaped down now.
2.5 weeks or so later.
Check it out. I have a new workbench. Just got back from Blade Show about a week ago. This project's been on hold for about 2.5 weeks or so, and we're getting back to it now. I got a brand new ginormous workbench. This thing is massive. We're gonna try it out at standing height, and then I can use a taller bar stool if I want to. I think it's gonna be really, really good. Got a new piece of granite. It's almost twice as big as my other flat granite over there. Dad made this, and it's got a solid maple top on it. He made all the legs and everything for it, solid steel. Once we figure out the height we want, Dad's gonna put some tabs on the bottom of the legs and screw it to the concrete so it'll be rock solid. Anyway, back to the buoy. Let me catch you up to what I've done so far today. I've been working on this thing for a couple hours. I roughly shaped down the fittings, just got them real rough. And I've taken out the middle spacer, because remember we cut the handle in half and there's gonna be a middle spacer in here. I took that out and I made a wooden copy of the middle spacer. It's the exact same thickness, plus or minus a thousandth or two. Same thickness as the middle spacer. It's got a slot for the tang to go through. It's got lineup pins and everything. The next stage I need to do is shape down the ivory. And it's easiest if you can shape it all down as one solid unit. But if you try to do it with this metal in here, the metal will get hot and it'll I don't want to get hot metal on the ivory. And it'll just be a little harder to shape the ivory and everything down nice and evenly because you'll have this extra hard piece of metal in here. And you can't just shape them down. You can't just put the lineup pins and shape them down together because when you spread them back out, it actually affects the lineup. So you need to shape it down with the same thickness of material in there as your middle spacer will be. So I got the wooden piece in there. We're gonna take the metal parts off. I've drawn some lines across here because I love my lines to reference off of. So I've got lines across here. So now, take off all the metal parts, and we need to secure this thing together because the line-up pins line it all up, but it could come apart real easy while I'm working on it. Take this bolt and run it through the inside of the handle, and we'll lightly bolt this thing down so it'll stay nice and clamped together while I'm over there on the grinder shaping it. I'll probably have to take it apart and check it out and see how it looks on the blade a couple times. I've got a line on the top and bottom here where the top and bottom of the front spacer meet, so I need to leave a little extra room there because we're going to do the museum fit or the bull nose or the heirloom fit type thing where the handle material is slightly larger than the metal spacers. Now that I've got the sides lightly sanded down, I'm just checking to make sure that they're parallel and square with the blade. So once I have these side lines nice and square with the blade, I can start shaping the rest of the handle based off of these nice parallel side lines. I'm using a height gauge to do some measurements to see if it's parallel with the blade and all squared up. Looks really good. I just need to take about 5/1000ths of an inch off of the back right here. Other than that, everything is really, really close. Probably don't even need to mess with 5/1000ths of an inch at this stage because that wouldn't be seen, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it anyway. Profile's done. The next thing I need to do is I wanna put a little bit of a taper to this handle. Right now it's pretty much the same width all the way down. So I've drawn some lines, some guidelines on both ends of the handle. I'm gonna leave this end alone. On the small end, I'm gonna grind it down to probably about halfway down to that line, and I'll use some measuring tools and stuff. I might even draw another line about right where I want it on the granite. Put a taper to this handle, then start rounding it and shaping it all up. It's gonna have a nice like oval shape to it, so I gotta round all these corners off after I get the handle into a taper shape. Shaping the fittings down to match the handle, and then once they're the same size as the handle where they fit up, I'll take some dividers and scribe a small line right around the edges of the fittings, and that'll allow me to grind them down just slightly smaller than the handle so I can do my museum fit. So right now I'm using a series of wedges that are different angles and stuff to get the right angles on here and get these pieces all shaped down so they're the exact same size as the handle. I got the middle piece pretty much ready to go. Now I'm gonna work a little bit more on the front spacer, and then I got a bunch to take off on the pommel. I've got the front spacer matching the handle taper really well. The next thing to do is to shape down this pommel to match the shape of the handle on the end here. So we can't just do it flat. We gotta match the angles coming off this. And I'll use some little wedges and stuff to do that. I got the front spacer reduced down in size to where there's a little bit of ivory sticking up all the way around. I've got the pommel reduced down, little ivory sticking up. They still have some stuff to smooth out on them, but I'll do that with the round wheel later. So now I'm gonna work on the hardest piece, which is the middle spacer, and the reason it's the hardest piece to get reduced down is because it's not just matching up to one piece of ivory, it's gotta match up to both pieces of ivory, so I gotta be careful not to accidentally grind too much off of one side or the other. I'm just put some black ink on the spacer, and I'm using this gold-plated Starrett set of dividers to describe a little line around here that I can grind to that's just a little bit smaller than what the end of the ivory is. They gotta be gold-plated sterrets, otherwise this won't work. Gold-plated sterret dividers. No. These are actually gold-plated because my brother-in-law was messing around with gold plating for a little bit and needed something fun to gold plate, and these were the nearest thing to the setup he had, so we're like, here, do this.
The next day.
All right, let me catch you up on what I've got going on so far here. What I've done is domed the pommel. It was a really, really thick, flat piece of metal on the end. I put a nice dome to it. I also lightly rounded the edge of the pommel, and I finished getting the pieces just the right size. I also hand sanded all these fittings, meaning the front spacer, middle spacer, and pommel. Hand sanded them to 220 grit, which is the finish I like before I start doing my gold inlay. There's no reason to take it any higher than that before the gold inlay. But I like to do a little bit of hand sanding before the gold inlay because it just kind of smooths out all the grinding and everything. I did tons of work on the guard. The guard was this big, massive, I mean it was thick, just big, massive, unshaped thing. It only had the main profile shaped out. So I shaped out the quillions, and that takes a lot of time to shape out these S-guards because you can draw a lot of lines and stuff. Like I have a lot of lines on here and a lot of lines right here to reference, but it still takes a fair amount of eyeballing and everything to get it just right. I milled about 120 thousandths of an inch deep with a 1/4 inch ball mill in 4 spots on the guard. And then I rounded that area in between to give me a little bit different look than I've ever done before. What I'm doing currently is trying to do some layout on the ends of the guard because everything's shaped on the guard except the ends. The ends are still rough, basically. Need to do some kind of layout on the ends so I can shape the tips of the guard to have some kind of matching style. I don't know if I'm gonna do like some kind of point or if I'm gonna just come in here and do some kind of lightly rounded thing. This is something that always stalls me a lot when it comes to doing these S guards. I'm always trying to like do just the right point on the guard, and I like to try to mix it up, but it always takes me forever to kind of figure out a layout that I like for the tips. But once I get a layout, I can grind those in, and this guard will be ready for a little hand sanding, and then the whole knife will almost be ready for gold inlay. I'll just probably do a little bit of hand sanding on the handle, and then we'll probably be ready for gold inlay. So something that can be really frustrating sometimes is when you want to do something new and different, it can be really hard to just make yourself do it. And sometimes forcing it just doesn't work, doesn't look good, won't happen. But it can be really exciting sometimes when you have something that's kind of cool and then it evolves over time and becomes this kind of variation on something that was simple and original at first. So a good example of that is down here. So this is looking at the top view of the guard, basically. This is kind of a guard shape that really took off for me and became pretty popular, where you got the curves from the quillions coming in, and then it's flat across right here, be flat across there. And then a variation I've done on that I really liked was you got the quillions coming in, the flat across here, and then you got these little rounded 1/4 inch grooves on there. And then that evolved into this newest one that I've done here that I'm really liking, and that's basically this variation, only I rounded that center part in there, and it gives this cool little look that's a little variation off of this original thing right here that was a little bit more simple. So yeah, sometimes stuff just has to evolve over time, and you can't make it become something just by forcing it. 20 minutes later. I finally got my guard shaped. It took a lot of eyeballing to get it just right. So the next thing I'm gonna start doing is hand sanding the guard to 220 grit to get it ready for gold inlay. Once that's done, I can start doing a little more sanding and grinding on the handle. I found a little more grinding I need to do on the handle, but I'm gonna do that later. So yeah, lots of hand sanding to do. In fact, I'll probably be hand sanding most of the rest of the day today. I've got got the handle hand sanded to 320 grit. I wanted to get it cleaned up a little bit before I do the bull nose on the ends. So it's at 320 grit. The next thing to do is round off all these edges a little bit where they meet up to the metal pieces, because it's oversized just a little bit. And that helps with shrinkage and stuff, like if the handle material shrinks or something in the future just a little bit, it won't leave like a weird little sharp edge there since it's on purpose. Or if it expands, it'll help with that problem too. And yeah, it's just a fit that I like to do on my stuff. I also like the texture. It feels cool and it gives another dimension to the knife. Put the fitting on here, and I used to use a Sharpie, but you don't want to use a Sharpie because sometimes the ivory, the ink can soak into the ivory and actually go really deep and you won't be able to get it out. So I'm just going to use a pencil and get a nice solid mark right up against the fitting, front spacer. Do that all the way around, and then we can use files and sandpaper or whatever else we got over there to round off this corner so it meets up to the front spacer really nicely. And now we got a good solid line, and I'll just barely take off all the pencil. Maybe just leave a tiny bit of it on there. So what you saw me doing last was taking a small file and putting a little bit of a bevel right up to the edge of my line we made on there. What you haven't seen yet is I'm cleaning that up and I'm kind of rounding it out with sandpaper. I've got some 320 grit and I'm just kind of holding it here in my lap and I'm going around it and sanding it. First I'm sanding it a little bit like this really sharp angle right here, and then I'll go a pass around like at the same angle I had my file at, and then I'll go a gentle pass around where I'm kind of changing the angle just to kind of smooth that out. You want to be careful not to sand up past your line very much though, because if you do that you'll have some metal that'll kind of have like a little gap under it, so you don't want to do that at all. If you end up doing that, pretty much the only way you can fix it is you can take it over to one of these, take it over to this plate. I got this plate with sandpaper on here, and sand the end of the handle down until you get back to fresh material where the metal's hitting on it. Normally I do this sanding part over in the vise, but since these pieces are cut in half and they're really short, it just wasn't enough room to work, so I'm just kind of holding it here in my lap and sanding it. It's actually working out better. We've got the bull noses done, or the museum fit, or the heirloom fit, whatever you like to call it. I like bull nose because that's what I started out with, because it reminds me of like bull nose cornering on like drywall that we used to do when I helped Dad build houses. Anyway, got it all rounded, so those are at 320 grit. I sand those as I go with the rest of the handle. I'm not going to sand the handle right now anymore, but as I sand the handle, like I'll do 600 next, and then I would do the bull nose at like 600, and then I would sand the main bit of the handle to 1500 and just have it go up in grits as you do the rest of the handle. So it really mellows out the look, and it's really starting to feel cool too. I'll put this puppy together and see what she's looking like. Every time I hit the end of this, I feel like this is on there and I'm gonna jab my hand into it, and that would hurt a lot. I'll show you what that would do to your hand here in a second. Oh yeah. We are completely ready for gold inlay on these fittings. First, let's test out this skull breaker. So yeah, every time I'm popping that handle on there, I feel like this is gonna be on there and I'm gonna do it without realizing and hurt my hand. It's sharp, like it's really sharp. I probably should dull it a little bit more. I mean, it's not a complete point, it's rounded a little bit, but it's still really sharp. I don't normally like to have it that sharp. I also ever so slightly rounded the tips of the guard because they were really sharp too. I'll probably round the tip of the buoy as well because it's really sharp. No, I'm not gonna do that. We like sharp tips on buoys. So. Not gonna say it. I can't say it on purpose. It has to come naturally. I can't start until you say action.
Oh, action.
Franco videoed me at the Blade Show to say hello to Philo and Adele. And I actually sat there and was waiting for him to say go.
Waiting for him to say
and then
action.
finally I was like, are you rolling? Because I was in my mind, I was actually just waiting for him to say action.
That's funny.
Okay. Saw that coming. The whole portion where I'm doing all my talking for most of the day, Dad's out there mowing right in the front of the house.